Good morning. I'm Jenny Buddenborg, Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development. I'm here, hopefully with my colleague Becca Deershow, who's probably going to be joining me, who's learning the ropes of our historic designation process, and she's been helping this designation along. And you're going to probably see more of her in the future, so hopefully she'll get here in time, and she may assist me with some questions today related to design review. Today I'm presenting on the proposed historic designation of the East 7th Avenue Historic District Steele Street Extension, as well as the proposed historic designation of Pancratia Hall. That is the second item on your agenda today. For this historic district presentation, I will provide detailed background on the landmark preservation, designation, and design review processes, which applies to both of these designation proposals. But I'm not going to repeat that information for Pancratia Hall just to save time, so just want to let you guys know that. For this historic district proposal, we are considering 19 properties on the east side of the 600 and 700 blocks of North Steele Street in the Congress Park neighborhood. This is a new historic district proposal. It is not an amendment to the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District. The ability to designate individual landmarks and historic districts in the city and county of Denver is set forth in the 1967 Landmark Preservation Ordinance. The purpose of that ordinance is fourfold. It's to designate, preserve, and protect Denver's historic places, foster civic pride, stabilize and improve aesthetic and economic vitality, and promote good urban design. Over the past 54 years since the ordinance was adopted by Denver City Council, the city has designated 352 individual landmarks and 57 historic districts, scattered across the city as you see indicated on the map. This equals more than 7,200 historically designated buildings in the city, representing roughly 4.5% of the city structures that are historically designated, and this percent is on par with other U.S. cities of our size. Of the existing designated historic districts, they are primarily residential, with only 5 commercial or downtown districts. There are also 2 historic cultural districts significant for their cultural history, and that is 5 points in the recently designated La Alma Lincoln Park Historic District. The designation process is community-driven, and applications can be submitted by a variety of persons. This application was submitted by 3 property owners who live within the boundaries of the proposed district. They spent the last 2 years developing the application and reaching out to other property owners to inform, educate, and solicit their support for the proposal. One of the major responsibilities of a property owner who owns a historically designated property is to maintain its historic character. When a property is designated, it is designated as is and requires no improvements by the city. Maintaining a property's historic character is achieved through landmark preservation design review for any exterior alterations that require a zoning or building permit. Landmark preservation has no purview over interior alterations of a designated property. Exterior alterations are guided by the design guidelines for Denver landmark structures and districts, a set of flexible principles that provide predictable regulations for owners, applicants, and staff. I do want to note that any zoning or building permits submitted prior to the effective date of a designation and that do not require any changes by the applicant or CPD after the effective date do not require landmark preservation design review. Total demolition of designated structures is highly discouraged and it is difficult to achieve, requiring review by Landmark Preservation Commission. Over the past several months, landmark preservation staff engaged property owners within the proposed district to clearly explain the design guidelines and design review process, including 2 community meetings, one in August 2021 and another in October 2021, as well as email communications with individuals. We discussed that most design review projects are administratively reviewed, like garages, roofing, or retaining walls, and therefore have quick review turnarounds. We also discussed that larger projects like window replacement require review by the Landmark Preservation Commission and therefore have a longer timeline. In all cases, landmark preservation staff work closely with applicants to find solutions and create an outcome that allows for changes while preserving the historic character of a property. And here on the screen is a list of exterior work that landmark preservation does and does not review. I'd like to also note that landmark preservation designation does not impact zoning of a property or properties. That falls under the Denver zoning code. There was some confusion about that with some of the property owners. For example, 22 of the city's 57 historic districts are currently zoned for ADUs. The landmark preservation design guidelines have been successfully applied to many new ADU constructions within those historic districts. The owners applicants of this proposed designation are Kendall Fuller, Jane Pritzel, and Tom Heath. The district is located within the Congress Park neighborhood and includes 19 primary structures, 18 that are contributing to the proposed historic district. This is within Council District 10. In Blueprint Denver, there are areas within the urban neighborhood context and low residential area future place. The current zoning is USUC. This is a discontiguous historic district in 2 separate sections, and was done in this way to avoid overlapping with the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District boundary. You can see by this map that a major justification for creating this new historic district is to include both the east and west sides of the 600 and 700 blocks of North Steele Street. The east side was actually left out of the 1993 East 7th Avenue Historic District designation. The designation approach taken for this proposed district follows the Curtis Park Historic District model, whereby small historic districts with different significance criteria and periods of significance were added over time. This proposed district has a period of significance from 1912 to 1990, while the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District has a period of significance prior to and including 1943. The proposed district meets all of the Landmark Preservation Ordinance designation criteria. It maintains its integrity, is more than 30 years old, meets 3 of 10 significance criteria, and provides a historic context for consideration by the Landmark Preservation Commission. The 3 significance criteria that the proposed district meets are A, it has a direct association with a significant historic event or with the historical development of the city, state, or nation. B, it has direct and substantial association with a recognized person or group of persons who had influence on society. And C, it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style or type. The proposed Steele Street extension has a direct association with the historical development of the city of Denver for its close association with the City Beautiful movement and the development of the East 7th Avenue Parkway, which runs between the 2 blocks of the proposed district. The City Beautiful movement was a philosophy of urban planning and design that emphasized grand public buildings, curated public spaces, and the incorporation of green space throughout the city, with the goal of instilling civic pride and encouraging moral virtue among all citizens. It began in Denver in 1904 with the election of Mayor Robert Speer and extended through the 1920s. Mayor Speer's vision included developing an extensive park and parkway system modeled on the City Beautiful movement in Europe. This included beautifying Cherry Creek, constructing Civic Center, and establishing the network of parks connected by boulevards and greenways. The houses in the proposed district were constructed between 1912 and 1924, when the City Beautiful movement was in full swing in Denver. This movement included the creation of pastoral parks and parkways throughout Denver, including the East 7th Avenue Parkway. Since its implementation, the parkway has been the focal point of the neighborhood. The shift in the parkway's design as it meets the proposed district at Steele Street is notable, making the 600 and 700 blocks significant as a marker between the older, more formal part of East 7th Avenue Parkway and the newer section where bungalows and other more modest housing styles flourished. The proposed historic district is also significant for its direct and substantial association with Judge Raymond D. Jones, who owned and lived at 780 North Steele Street for over 40 years. Judge Jones was a well-known personality on Steele Street who played an active role in the civil rights movement in Denver, was a notable attorney and judge, and was the first African-American to serve on the appellate court in Colorado. Born in Pueblo, Colorado, Jones studied political science at Colorado College, one of only 5 African-American students in attendance in 1964. After graduating from Colorado College, Jones went on to earn a law degree from Harvard University in 1971. He then worked in New York City on Wall Street, but returned to Denver to clerk for the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court, Justice Edward Pringle. He was appointed as a trial judge for the Denver County Court, where he served for 2 years before serving for 9 years on the Denver District Court and 2 years as the Chief Justice of the Aurora Municipal Court. In 1988, he was appointed an associate judge of the Colorado Court of Appeals, the first African-American judge to hold such a position, and he remained in that role for 15 years. Later in his life, Judge Jones taught at Colorado College and Metro State University, and he helped form the Sam Carey Association of Black Attorneys and Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Theater. Finally, the proposed district is significant as it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of the Craftsman style. 16 out of 19 structures exhibit the distinguishing characteristics of the style. Defining features include low-pitched gabled or hipped roofs, wide overhanging eaves, often with exposed rafter tails, ridge beams, and knee braces, and full or partial width porches with substantial square or tapered columns supporting the porch roof. The bungalows in the proposed district were constructed between 1914 and 1924 at the height of the style's popularity in Denver. The only structure not built in the Craftsman style include 1 4-square and 1 central passage double pile, but these 2 homes were built within the period of significance and are representative of their era of construction. There's also 1 structure originally built in the Craftsman style that has been significantly altered and lost the defining features of this architectural style due to a fire in the 1980s. So overall, the proposed district retains its integrity of location, design, workmanship, material, setting, feeling, and association. There have been some alterations to primary structures in the district, including window replacement and the construction of retaining walls. However, these changes do not negatively impact the historic character or integrity of the historic district. Pictured on the screen in the lower right is a structure damaged by fire, 716 North Steele Street. It required extensive repair, and the original design was altered, including the addition of an attached garage, additional dormers, and enclosure of the front porch. These alterations impact the integrity of the original structure, and therefore it is non-contributing to the proposed district. The 1912 to 1990 period of significance reflects the district's many areas of significance, starting with its construction during the late City Beautiful movement and extending through its association with Judge Raymond Jones, who lived in the district during his active life. The proposed district relates to the City Beautiful era development of properties in central Denver along streetcar lines and adjacent to parks and parkways. And it also represents the evolution and changing demographics of the Congress Park neighborhood from its early 1900s residential expansion to the city's urban renaissance in the 1970s to 1990. On November 2nd, Landmark Preservation Commission unanimously approved the proposed designation and forwarding it to City Council for consideration as it meets all designation criteria. The Landmark Preservation Ordinance also provides an opportunity for the Planning Board to make a recommendation to City Council regarding designation of historic districts. Planning Board may review a proposed district designation with respect to its relationship to the Denver Comprehensive Plan, the effect of the designation upon the surrounding neighborhood, and such other planning considerations as may be relevant to the proposed designation. A quick reminder that the proposed historic district is located within the USUC zone district. That's urban single unit. Currently, ADUs are not allowed in this zone district. The proposed district reinforces the vision of Comprehensive Plan 2040 through the preservation of important architectural and historical assets in the Congress Park neighborhood, primarily through the vision element of strong and authentic neighborhoods, and within that vision, goals 1, 2, 3, and 6. The proposed district will preserve the city's authentic historic character, enhance design excellence, and contribute to a strong sense of community identity. Designation of the proposed district advances these attributes of quality design through design review of new infill and alterations by using a set of predictable design standards. The proposed district is within the urban neighborhood context and low residential future place type, as was shared earlier. This context and type includes predominantly single and 2-unit properties with accessory dwelling units and duplexes being appropriate when they can be thoughtfully integrated. Buildings are lower in scale and closer to the street, typically with alley access, which is the case in this neighborhood. Blueprint Denver also notes that public parks such as East 7th Avenue Parkway are vital components of the quality of life infrastructure, and these city-owned spaces are planned to remain parks. This proposed historic designation maintains these neighborhood attributes. The district will allow for alterations and growth or infill that is compatible with the existing neighborhood character through landmark design review. Designation of the district also aligns with multiple recommendations within Blueprint Denver that allow for alterations and infill that are compatible with the existing neighborhood character through landmark design review, as well as preserving and creating authentic places. Overall, the proposed designation is consistent with Blueprint Denver recommendations and reinforces the plan's policies. It also helps advance the Blueprint Denver metric related to increasing the percent of the city subject to design-focused standards, like the design guidelines for Denver landmark structures and districts. Lastly, this designation resulted in part from the block's inclusion in the Congress Park Neighborhood Survey via the citywide building survey Discover Denver, and thus also contributes to measuring the success of that program. The district is also guided by the East Central Area Plan. The plan identifies the proposed district as an area of historic significance, which is defined as a collection of structures and features identified by the citywide building survey Discover Denver that is significant for its history, architecture, and culture, and is potentially eligible for local historic designation and application of other tools that will maintain its character. The proposed district also aligns with multiple recommendations within the East Central Area Plan, including policy L9, L6, and COP-L1, each of which strives to maintain the character of buildings and neighborhoods through historic preservation and designation. Historic designation would help preserve the character-defining features of the district. There would be no direct effect on the surrounding neighborhood, as the designation would only impact the 2 half blocks in question, and there would be no zoning changes to accompany the district designation. And as mentioned, the designation would not change the Blueprint Denver future place type or neighborhood context. The intent of the designation is to recognize this unique district, the buildings that define it, and their contribution to the historic fabric of the Congress Park neighborhood and city of Denver as a whole. On November 17th, the Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of the proposed historic designation to City Council based on these criteria. As of the date of the Ludi staff brief that you guys received, CPD has received comment from 28 individuals, 2 RNOs, and 1 interested party, it's Historic Denver, regarding the proposed historic district. Public comment includes responses to the city-hosted online survey, emails submitted to LPC staff, and verbal comment provided at the LPC public hearing and planning board meeting. Some respondents provided comment multiple times through the various communication channels, and of those, some shifted their support. Of the property owners within the proposed historic district boundary who have provided comment, 11 are in support, 0 are neutral, and 3 are in opposition. Since the staff brief was submitted, one additional Denver resident submitted comment in opposition to the proposed district, which was forwarded to you before today's meeting for your consideration. Based on the Landmark Preservation Ordinance designation criteria, the findings of the Landmark Preservation Commission that the application meets the criteria for designation of a district, and the recommendation of approval by the Denver Planning Board, staff recommends approval of this application. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jenny. I want to welcome Councilmember Sandoval and Sandoval to committee. Up first, we have Councilwoman Black.
Hi.
Your microphone, Councilwoman.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Herndon. Can you go back to the previous slide? What concerns me is that 3 of the property owners oppose it. Can you tell us why they oppose it?
Our understanding of that is primarily because they don't like the perceived restrictions of going through landmark design review for exterior alterations to the properties. They feel that it's extra hoops, steps that they have to go through to get work done on their homes. There's one particular property owner who we've been working with a little more than the others. She's been more engaged in learning and understanding about design review, and one of her big concerns, for example, was a window replacement and whether that could be done. You might remember in my presentation, a number of the buildings already that are contributing to this district have had window replacements, so it is something that we do approve through landmark design review, but it is something that has to go through that design review process. However, I also mentioned, if this property owner were to order a set of new windows prior to the effective date of this historic designation, then landmark would have no purview over that whatsoever.
So windows are something that come up a lot. And over the years, we've heard from a lot of homeowners who say that the windows that they're allowed to put in are way more costly than other options. So are you all looking at maybe changing that?
Yeah, windows are a tough one.
Seems to be a sticking point.
Mm-hmm. Windows are a very character-defining feature of a historic building, so that's why they always kind of rise to the top of, significance and become a big discussion topic. Landmark Preservation is currently in the process of updating its design guidelines, and we will be talking about windows and how we can potentially look at changing that design review element. We're going through a pretty robust community engagement process, so people have the ability to share their ideas and thoughts about how window replacement and repair is currently reviewed under the landmark design review and how there might be improvements that could be made to it moving forward.
And what's the timeline for that process?
It's actually multi-phase and over multi-years. We just kicked off the first public meeting, I think a couple of weeks ago now, when we're planning for the next one, and we're going through individual topics such as windows, such as retaining walls, such as materials. We haven't hit windows yet. And Becca is here. Do you know when we are going to actually get to that? So phase 2, and we're currently in phase 1, so phase 2 will kick off next year.
And are you including people who own designated structures?
In the outreach?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So we have been reaching out in various ways to engage folks who live within currently designated historic districts and individual landmark properties, as well as the general public to take part in these conversations.
Okay, so a couple more questions, and it's about more than just windows, but I'm just bringing this up because we have heard a lot about windows over the years, and windows that cost an enormous amount of money because they have to be custom made compared to windows that I would put in my house. But now I forgot. I've lost my train of thought. So the 3 who are in opposition, would it be possible to just exclude them from the historic district?
All three of their properties are considered contributing to the historic district. We generally do not cherry pick individual properties because as a whole, that is what makes the significance of the historic district. I will say to your comment about windows, they don't necessarily have to be customized for historic buildings. Even if you were to put vinyl windows, which some properties in this historic district already have, those aren't necessarily customized. Windows do have to fit the size of the given area on a property, but there's not necessarily customization that has to go along with it. And also to be clear, we approve window replacement in historic districts. Vinyl is not a material, though, that we do generally approve for historic properties.
Well, I would be interested in learning more about windows and what is acceptable and what's not, because I have, again, heard from so many people about this being a sticking point, and so I would just like to learn more about that and see just how flexible it is. It gives me angst to designate somebody's property without their permission. So I really would want to learn more about what their concerns are. I did have one person reach out and schedule a phone call with me, but until today, I didn't really know much about this. And when I think of the other thing I was going to say, I'll buzz back in. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to follow up with you on the windows.
Thank you, Councilwoman Black. Council President Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is all fresh in our minds because we just talked about some of these things yesterday in budget and policy. Thank you for the presentation. And I guess I would like you to send over the criteria for the windows and doors replacements. What is approved? If you can't do vinyl windows, but they might need to be custom made, can you tell us what the cost differential is for these?
No, there's no consistent number or cost differential. I don't even think we can clearly say that, replacing windows without doing vinyl is necessarily more expensive. I think it really depends on the manufacturer, depends on, the type of material that you are using, the contractor. So we don't have clear numbers that say, window replacement on historic buildings is more expensive than buildings that don't have to go through landmark design review. But I can certainly send you the design guideline sections for windows and doors.
Okay, that would be helpful. I guess, are there approved vendors? Is there assistance or resource? Or you're just kind of like, we'll say yes or no, but property owner, you need to go figure this out on your own?
We can recommend certain manufacturers, but we can't have a relationship for a manufacturer and say, for example, you should go to, Anderson Windows to get your windows.
But are there local companies here in Denver?
Yeah,
or do
absolutely.
they have to order them and they have to be shipped here?
Yeah, and Historic Denver helps in that way too, as the local nonprofit, where they can also help connect people to contractors and professionals who have done this work. So they can play that level of assistance along with this as well.
Okay. And then I just want to understand, because you said this might be a 2-year process around reviewing this, and windows and doors are really, really important around energy efficiency. And so are you working with CASR or the Climate Office about this? Because if you all have much more strict criteria and it makes it a burden, it makes it difficult for people, or that these 3 property owners don't want to have that added burden, because it is a burden. You just can't call Scott and say, Scott Windows, and say, I'm going to put an order in and these are the dimensions. It sounds like there's more work involved with it. And I would like to know what the response is back around energy efficiency, especially as we're looking at climate change and wanting to make sure that we're keeping heating and cooling costs low in the city. It doesn't seem like these two, it seems like they're counter to each other versus working in alignment. And so I would like more information about that, or maybe a follow-up meeting on it. So, all right, thank you.
I can just quickly say too that we do sit on task forces and working groups with CASR with a lot of the policies and practices that they're looking to put forth. So we are part of those conversations. And especially as we look to update the design guidelines too, that's a perfect partnership to have a stronger conversation there. You can just call up window manufacturers too and say, these are my dimensions for a historic building. So it doesn't have to be, specifically customizable that would be any different from a building that is not historically designated. I'm sure there are some instances where that's not the case, but for the most part, you can do that. So it's not necessarily a bigger burden in that way.
Okay, well, it still sounds like we're sitting in our ivory tower telling property owners what they can and can't do in the vein of landmarking something, but maybe not talking about energy efficiencies or those real world problems that we're trying to address. And so would appreciate some follow-up information on it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Up next, we've got Councilwoman Sandoval.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I was reading through the application and I see that 3 of the property owners are the applicants. But what I can't figure out, are they 3 of the property owners who are going to be in the proposed district or 3 of the property owners who are already in the district? Because this is an extension of an established district.
Sure, yeah, good question. They're within the proposed historic district boundary.
And I was trying to find a slide on outreach. So can you, I came in late, so sorry if I missed it, but I went through your presentation and I'm looking at the application. Can you talk to me about the process? Like, did they have community meetings and when did this come about? Can you inform me on that?
Yeah, I can speak more clearly to our outreach, obviously, and I can try to synopsize what the applicants did as well. For us, we did 2 community meetings in advance of the application, one in advance of the application in August of this year before it was submitted to us, and then another afterwards to do another meeting with property owners and interested parties to talk about the designation process and the design review process. And then, of course, all the required notifications that we have as well for the designation process. So each property owner has been reached out to already twice with a mailed letter, for example, in addition to emails that have been forwarded on from the applicants. The applicants started this process about 2 years ago and did a lot of door-to-door outreach with neighbors. They hosted meetings as well. I think they handed out flyers to property owners. So they have been doing this pretty continuously over the past couple of years. They reached out to RNOs as well, to Councilman Hines to inform him of their efforts too. So they have been working pretty steadfastly to make sure that people are getting some good outreach. In addition to that, Historic Denver has been helping with this too. Judge Raymond Jones' home was one of their, I'm going to get this wrong, I think it's like their 50 actions, whatever that name is, I always forget it. So they've been engaged too in advising the applicants on the outreach that they've been doing.
Perfect, thank you. Now, so as much as windows are a topic, I don't think that we talk about the incentive that we have for historic districts. So can you clearly talk to us about the tax incentive? Because I think that gets overlooked a lot of times. And in some of the historic districts in Northwest Denver, yes, you have to go through this process. It's a permit. So I think that we need to clearly say that it's a permit to replace your window. Yes, you have to go through LPC to get your permit, but as my home any of our homes on the dais, we'd have to get a permit to get our windows replaced. So that's like for like. The only other process is I'd have to go through design review. But I, as a homeowner who don't have a historic home, I don't get tax incentives. So can you talk to us about the tax incentive that these 19 properties could qualify for?
Sure, yeah. So when a property is designated locally, it does open them up to the state rehabilitation tax credits, which is a 20% tax credit on qualified rehabilitation expenses that can be taken on your income tax. So it can be a really big benefit to homeowners who are looking to do work. In a small amount is $5,000, and up. So it can really help these projects work, and properties that are not designated don't have access to that. The other thing that's beneficial of historic districts, which has been proven in a number of studies over the years, is that property values maintain more stability. So when the economy fluctuates, you don't see an up and down as much in historic districts as you do in areas that aren't designated historic districts. So that's also, I think, a sense of relief and consistency for property owners that's viewed as an incentive.
Okay, and then for the windows or doors, So similar to planning board, you have a consent agenda item, do you not, for the LPC, Landmark Preservation Commission? Do windows usually land on consent, or are they usually debated out and talked about? I've seen both happen, but I've seen it happen more in the Lodo area than I have in my residential little neighborhoods that I have, those districts. So can you talk to us about what the process looks like for an application for windows, and does it go on consent or is it debated?
Can I actually bring up Becca? She's more experienced in the design review area than I am, and will be able to answer that better for you.
Hello, I'm Becca Deershaw. I'm a senior city planner with Landmark Preservation. That's a great question about where windows end up. I would say it's probably, windows are complex and they are very important to buildings. And so oftentimes it is debated by the full commission. And that gives the benefit of letting the commission really understand if the windows are significant, if they're character defining. We do see them on the consent agenda, but I would say probably the majority of them do go to the full commission for review.
Okay, and then on the process that you're doing with the design review guidelines, right? I have like 5 historic districts, so we hosted a Ask a Planner, so I'm super involved in looking at those. The one thing that I couldn't understand from the description of the project, are you looking at each individual district's design review? Like, so I have Potter Highland. I have the Ghost Historic District. This is its own historic district. Alma Lincoln Park has its own guidelines, right? Are you going to fine tooth, like with a fine tooth comb, go through every one of those districts and look at their guidelines? Or is it super, super, super high level looking at things such as windows and doors on all of the district's guidelines? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. So our design guidelines, we have the main body of guidelines, and they cover things like additions and new construction and windows and doors and rehabilitation. And then we have supplements to those guidelines, which are the neighborhood-specific guidelines. Right now, we are not looking at those neighborhood-specific guidelines. We're focusing really on the main body of guidelines because those can apply to every neighborhood, with the exception of La Alma Lincoln Park and 5 Points, which have their own guidelines. But we figure sort of a bigger bang for our buck right now is to focus on fixing all the things that we've heard from the community in our main body of guidelines.
And then through this process, are you creating quote unquote a bike rack of issues that come up through community, and then you'll be able to tailor them down to the specificity of these districts, like phase 2, 3?
I think really we're starting with we are creating a bike rack because we hear it all the time. People are like, oh, actually, could you add this on? We're like, yeah, of course. And, in our first meeting for the guidelines, we said, here's what we think might be the order we tackle these in. What do you guys think? And we heard resoundingly, well, let's change this around. We don't think these are a problem at all. And so we re-triggered the order that we're doing these things in. And so we're definitely taking feedback all the time, updating how we're going to do it to really be responsive to what the community needs us to do.
Okay. And did the 3 people who are in opposition, they spoke at LPC and Planning Board, or just wrote letters?
So the one who was really concerned with the window replacement on her home has attended. She has spoke at both LPC and at Planning Board, and has also put in a response to our online survey.
Okay.
The other 2, I'm sure you're testing my memory now. I think one was just at the Landmark Preservation Commission where he shared his opposition verbally. And then the other person, she spoke there as well, and she may have also submitted an email too, or actually she also responded to the online survey.
Online survey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And one last question, Mr. Chair. Can you, on your packet, are they all, they're probably 3 sporadic, right? But are they on between 8th and 7th or 7th and 6th? Do you know?
So I'm sorry, I don't have the comments in front
And
of
you
me
could
right
send
now.
that to me afterwards.
Yeah, I
I
think
would
maybe
just
I'll
like-
follow up with
Yeah, will
that.
you follow up? I'd just like to know where within these boxes they're located.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, I can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. Okay, colleagues, we do have 3 more action items, and we just got a little under an hour left. Up next, we've got Councilman Cashman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In line with my colleague, Councilwoman Black and President Gilmore, I'm wondering, in the mission of preservation, Denver's approach to preservation, does it address climate change at all as a value?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, historic buildings, depending on when they were built, we're starting to enter into buildings now in the modern era that used more materials and technology than they did the natural environments, you know, to be able to draw from it. But historic buildings, especially constructed before World War II, really used passive design elements to be able to be sustainable. I know windows are always a really big one. You know, part of the issue is like anything, our lives, our bodies, our cars, things break down and they need to be maintained. And if they're not, then they start to fall apart. So inherently, there is definitely a sustainability movement, and then also in the repair.
Is there an actual statement of addressing climate
Within our
change?
design guidelines, yes.
Can you
Yeah.
forward that to me, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Jenny. Thanks.
You good, Councilman?
Yes, I'm quite well, thank you.
Councilwoman Black, you're back up.
All right, really quick. Councilwoman Sandoval, you actually don't need a permit to replace your windows at home unless you're making them a different size. No, I'm looking at it right now. You don't need to. But anyway, did they look at any other options like a conservation overlay? I mean, we all celebrate the Crisana Park in Councilman Cashman's district, and I know yesterday Councilwoman Sandoval mentioned a facade overlay. I mean, have they looked at anything else like that?
My understanding is that they were interested in the designation, in part because this does continue the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District. When that was originally proposed, it actually included these 2 half blocks and all the way to Colorado Boulevard. And our understanding is it was cut short because it was already a pretty large historic district and people weren't too keen on the idea of having something even bigger. So it is continuing that significance of East 7th Avenue, and it just made sense, I think, for it to be historic district versus anything else.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Black. Well, that was an extensive conversation on 1365. Seeing nothing else, do we have a motion to move 1365 to the full council? Moved by Councilwoman Torres, seconded by Councilman Cashman. Any objections from the voting members? Seeing none, 1365 moves to the full council. Thank you very much.
Actually, I'll need a second. Councilman Cashman's not on the committee.
Oh, Councilman Cashman, you, wait, you need a, say that again, Jack? You have
I'll second.
Thank you.
Black. Wait, why couldn't Councilman Cashman second? Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Sorry, I was thinking FENCO.
Okay, it's like,
Sorry.
yes, he is.
You're good. Sorry,
Okay.
Late
my fault.
night last night, it's all good.
Was there a recall I wasn't advised of or something here?
That's like, I'm staring at his name on the committee list. That's why I was suddenly confused. All right, we are good. 1365 goes to the full council. Thank you all.